While John Lennon is known as the quintessential peacemaking hippie of rock and roll, there have been a considerable number of big-name rock stars who hated Lennon's guts and took shots at him whenever they could. Here are a couple of rock stars who hated John Lennon. The band Steely Dan wasn't too crazy about John Lennon after he went on the Dick Cavett Show with Yoko Ono in 1971, promoting his agenda against the war in Vietnam and his bedside protesting. And the following year, in 1972, the band would release a track titled "Only a Fool Would Say That" in response to Lennon's anti-war remarks and disparaging of American soldiers fighting in Vietnam, with the claim that Lennon was being a fool with his anti-American and ignorant behavior for living in his hippie bubble while American soldiers die in Vietnam. Joni Mitchell is another legendary rocker who was never a fan of Lennon's music and beliefs and has often spoken about her dislike for him in the Beatles. She said that when she met Lennon, he was quite rude to her and found her unbearable to be around even though they had just met. On top of that, he felt she was a subpar musician herself and didn't even really acknowledge her directly. In terms of the music, Joni never said she didn't like the Beatles, she just believes the music really isn't her style. But in terms of John Lennon, Joni has never liked John Lennon. Paul Simon is another musician who's always been wary of Lennon, and while he never actually spoke quite negatively of the Beatles, Paul has always been suspicious about John Lennon's political beliefs and always questioned his antics. A perfect example was when Paul spoke about Lennon's Power to the People track, which Simon felt was leftist propaganda Lennon was spewing out to his massive following, and he felt that after Lennon's death, many of his suspicions about John were true, mainly about how much of an influential figure he was and the reach he had on the youth, making him the perfect person to spread such a message. The relationship between John Lennon and Frank Zappa proved to be a rocky one, as the two would take shots at each other through the press and even share the stage with each other, as Lennon would make fun of Zappa for thinking he was a genius songwriter, when at best he was an average guitar player, and Zappa would claim Lennon stole an idea from him, this song being the song Jam Rag, which Zappa claims was originally his, as he would perform the song with Lennon and Yoko Ono in New York in 1971, which Lennon and Yoko would later take full songwriting credit for. And it's safe to say, Zappa would always be bitter with Lennon even up until his own death. It's safe to say Lou Reed had a love-hate relationship with the Beatles, and let's not kid ourselves, in 1964 when the Beatles were the biggest band in the world, he was a fan and has been on record saying he liked some of the Beatles songs. However, in terms of John Lennon, he wasn't so crazy about him, and found Lennon rather pretentious and silly in character. However, this should be taken with a grain of salt, as Lou often covered Lennon's music both from the Beatles and solo catalog. Elvis Presley, to no surprise, was bitter at Lennon's reach with the youth and found him a threat to society, so much so, it's speculated he communicated to the US government about his wariness of Lennon and alerted them to survey what he's doing. He especially found Lennon's tirade against the war in Vietnam anti-American, and even believed that Lennon had the ability to be a communist. On top of that, he wasn't crazy about the Beatles, and while he met the band and spoke to them, it's safe to say the king was not a fan of the Beatles or John Lennon. Joan Baez was yet another big-name rock star who was uncomfortable when asked about her experience with John Lennon and felt he was a bit of an oddball. Joan even said that while she doesn't hate the Beatles or anything, when she met John Lennon she was turned off by his demeanor and felt unsettled in his presence, especially since Lennon was interested in going out with Joan, but Joan would turn Lennon down as she felt they didn't have any chemistry and the two were just very different animals and refused to sleep with him. And when Lennon was asked about Joan, he downgraded her music and called her overrated. Now, was Lennon's comments his genuine opinion, or was he just sore about being turned down by Joan? Anyways, those are the rock stars who hated John Lennon. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments down below what you think, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more great videos just like this one.